on Kiwi.
Basically, this generation is more liberal, more tolerant, more Democrat-leaning than the one before. It's not just because they're young.
For another point of view, it's Hard News with Russell Brown and Wammo on Kiwi.
From publicaddress.net and also the Media 7 show on TVNZ7. It's Russell Brown. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning.
First topic of discussion today, we've got a few to get through. Name suppression.
Yeah, we seem to be in the middle of a perfect storm on name suppression at the moment, don't we?
It looked like the Herald yesterday were organising some kind of lynch mob, complete with torches and pitchforks.
Yeah, exactly. I think the Herald are absolutely campaigning on this. The backdrop to this is the Law Commission last week released its paper on name suppression, on suppression laws in general, and whether there should be reforms, and there probably will be, and it does actually recommend making the process of granting them tighter and more consistent. And then yesterday you had the Herald pretty much, going vox pops in your views. I mean, throwing an issue like name suppression to your views, to a whole bunch of people who really haven't had any chance to think about it or been given any information. And then, of course, later in the day, New Zealanders aren't happy with our name suppression laws. And it really does look like a political campaign.
In fact, I think also one of the headlines was the public demands the right to know who the entertainer is.
Oh, yeah. I think this person, frankly, is just useful at the moment. He's been caught up in what's a wider political campaign on name suppression, because journalists hate name suppression, and that's sort of fair enough. But there are reasons it's granted, and it's very easy to start crying celebrity justice. But basically what this guy's lawyer did was the same as anyone else's lawyer can. He provided evidence to the judge that demonstrated that his suffering from a conviction would be out of proportion to the offence committed. Yeah. And the judge said, yes, it is. You might disagree with it, but there was nothing unusual or weird about it. People do it all the time.
But isn't it the issue of name suppression that has drawn more attention to the case than what it would have been if there was no name suppression?
Yeah, that's the irony. And in the post I did yesterday, I noted that we still talk about the 2005 case of the All Black who received a discharge without conviction and name suppression on the charge of assaulting his wife. And that was, I think anyone who's familiar with the details would agree, a minor case of assault. He should have kept his hands off his wife, but there was no hitting. He tried to drag her back in the house. And what people tend to forget in that one was that the name suppression was at the request of the victim.
Right.
And you can go to the Sensible Sentencing Trust's website, and they, it's actually kind of ironic because they say this case shows the futility of all suppression orders except those demanded by victims. And so, did you not read the details? This one was the man's wife, didn't want to have to go the public route because it just becomes a media circus.
But I guess, what about regardless of the whys and wherefores of name suppression, what about we're now living in this new age where information is instant, it spreads so easily, doesn't it make a joke of it anyway? It
does, and I'm not quite sure what to do about that.
Yeah.
But whether that means you should entirely give up on it, I'm not sure. The Law Commission, at the same time as it recommended tightening access to name suppression, raised a few mildly alarming ideas, which seemed to indicate that they were saying that ISP should actively, say, block content from overseas if it breaches a suppression order.
Goodness.
A, that's impossible, and B, that's kind of scary.
Well, let's say the Guardian decided to print it, which they couldn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the case to go back to is the one of the so-called dope-smoking billionaire Peter Lewis in the 90s, whose case was reported in legitimate overseas newspapers.
Yeah.
And if you knew where you were looking, you could find that name quite easily. And yet it was suppressed in New Zealand, but overseas publications weren't subject to that suppression order. So it is really difficult.
Hey, just wondering if you could clear something up. When let's say an entertainer has name suppression, are all names relating to that entertainer suppressed, or is it just the given names of that particular person?
The courts take a dim view of what they would see as attempts to imply someone's name or information that would lead an ordinary reader to be able to deduce the name.
Yeah.
Because I've had to warn a couple of people about that on public address.
Yeah.
You might think you're being clever, but you're not, and the courts really don't like that. So, information that would lead someone to discover a suppressed name is just as bad as anything else.
Interesting. Also, I saw a posting from, I think, Graham Edgler. The lawyer. He's a lawyer, isn't he?
He is. Yes.
He said that it's not illegal for people to tell other people, like John Key was told by someone.
No. Only to publish it, and around the edges, what constitutes publication is actually somewhat uncertain still. We live in the age of email where everyone publishes.
Yeah.
But you can still tell your mate. That's been upheld.
Does that include digital communication?
Well, yeah. That's the grey part, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. Yeah, as we've discussed, it's a really difficult idea to negotiate in the digital age. I mean, you remember back to the celebrity drug bust. I mean, those names, including the wrong ones, coursed down the country within a day. I had my mum telling me who they were. But it is interesting because, as I said, we every time this comes up, the case of the All Black who got name suppression comes up, and yet we never remember that in 2007. Sitiveni Sivivatu, the All Black wing, who actually was an All Black rather than a fringe All Black, he assaulted his wife and received a discharge without conviction as well, but didn't get name suppression. And the irony there is, because there was no name suppression, it's kind of everyone's moved on. Whereas with the earlier case, which was a much less serious assault, we suddenly, every time that we talk about name suppression, we come up with that one and start screaming celebrity justice.
Yeah.
I do kind of wonder with the current case with the prominent entertainer. I'm actually wondering whether he may just have to give up and give them what they want.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. The irony here is that the best way to make it go away might be to sign up for a couple of, have the suppression order drop, sign up for a couple of exclusive softball interviews, because that's what happened. Yeah. I mean, you look at people like Clint Rickards were able to negotiate utterly soft stories with the Sunday Star Times, who are, of course, amongst those, tub thumping on the moral front on the current case. Yeah. But there's an unattractive side to the media here, because it's not about the offence itself. It's about the celebrity. I mean, no one who commits that offence, performing an indecent act with intent to assault, which is what you get for mooning someone in public, no one who commits that offence has it reported, let alone high up in the 6 o'clock news and all over the papers.
And ridiculous thing at the end of the day, for most of New Zealand, for most mainstream New Zealand, we'll end up going, what, who?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
That was it. Right, okay, move on.
Yeah. And I kind of think that's almost where we're at the moment. I'm not entirely comfortable with that. That would basically mean that the newspaper editors, people who needed to sell newspapers, have actually usurped the role of the judge, who is, in our system, is the one who's supposed to make those decisions. Which I find a little bit creepy, but
Hey, just finally, something to finish on. You linked on your Twitter account this morning to an interesting article by a blogger called Imperator Fish.
Yes.
Who has pointed out to Jeanette Fitzsimmons to be the fool of the day. Yeah,
kind of. It's very unfortunate that she met with Richard Gage, founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, who spoke at Te Papa last week and was also interviewed somewhat controversially by Kim Hill. I'm really disappointed in Jeanette Fitzsimmons. It's pretty classic conspiracy theorist stuff, this guy. And the worst thing is that they're now using her name.
Yeah, and she signed a petition.
Signed a petition on it.
Called the Politicians for 9/11 Truth Petition.
Because basically the contention of these people is that the buildings couldn't have possibly collapsed the way they did, and that there was a preconceived plot to place explosives in the major buildings that collapsed, and then detonate them after the planes flew into them. And the number of people who would have to have been privy to that conspiracy is absolutely astonishing.
Yeah.
It doesn't fly. The scientific evidence doesn't fly. But the funny thing is, actually, and this came up in discussions on the website yesterday, is that there actually are a lot of unanswered questions about those 9/11 attacks. But it's not to do with a prior conspiracy. It's to do with the utter fecklessness and incompetence of most of the public agencies when it happened.
Yeah.
A guy called John Farmer has, who was the chief counsel to the 9/11 Commission, he's the dean of Rutgers Law School, has written a book, not Ground